Every business, regardless of its size, must provide its employees with safe working conditions. And considering the range of potential hazards, from asbestos to slippery stairs to excessive noise, that can be difficult for a small business. And why should everyone be so concerned about job safety and health? Because each year, approximately 6,000 employees in this country die from workplace injuries, while another 50,000 die from illnesses caused by exposure to workplace hazards. In addition, 6 million workers suffer non-fatal workplace injuries at an annual cost to U.S. businesses of more than $125 billion. Standards and rules for safe working conditions, tools, equipment, facilities, and processes are set by the Labor Department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. OSHA standards apply to every private employer with one or more employees, except for those in industries covered by other federal job safety legislation. Today, roughly 93 million employees across the country are protected by state and federal OSHA programs. But even with adequate safety measures, accidents do happen. Today, the Insider Exclusive News team is on location in Round Rock, Texas, filming a new Justice in America TV special, Justice in America, Felipe Marentes' story, to examine how former Texas Governor Rick Perry and the state's current governor, Greg Abbott, may have created the ideal business climate for employers, but unfortunately left workers' safety and welfare far behind. There's something about the thriving economy, though, that state leaders rarely mention. Texas has led the nation in worker fatalities for 11 of the past 14 years. And when Texans get hurt or killed on the job, they have some of the weakest protections and stingiest benefits in the country. While Texas has a division of workers' compensation, it is the only state that doesn't require any private employer to carry workers' compensation insurance or a private equivalent, so more than 500,000 people have no occupational benefits when they get injured on the job. That means they often rely on charities or taxpayers to pay for their care. This Justice in America Network TV story is about one of Texas's dedicated and hard-working workers, Felipe Marentes, a husband and a father, who was killed while working on the job because of the gross negligence of his employer, Phoenix Fabricators and Erectors, LLC. On July 6, 2018, Felipe was welding a large metal top panel of a water tower to the base on a project in Porter, Texas. He attached himself to the very panel that he was welding as instructed by his supervisor at Phoenix, just as he had many times before, which Phoenix had been warned against by their safety manager, Luke Humphrey. These key plates were not tested to determine if they would hold while an employee welded. Even the job foreman ordered that the crew not use safety poles to support the panels, as this was time-consuming and costly. Unfortunately, the key plates failed, and Felipe died when he fell 45 feet with the heavy panels falling on top of him. Now, under Texas law, when an employee works for an employer with workers' compensation coverage, a workers' comp claim is normally the exclusive legal remedy, meaning that an injured worker or the survivors in a work-related death cannot file a personal injury or wrongful death lawsuit against the employer. However, Texas law does provide exceptions to this law if it was caused by an intentional act or omission of the employer or by the employer's gross negligence. Our news team is meeting with Todd Keller, partner at the Carlson law firm, and Felipe's widow, Maria Marentes, to discuss the challenges and the strategies Todd is using to prove that Phoenix Fabricators and Erectors knew that the danger of death or serious bodily injury existed, yet nevertheless they proceeded with a conscious indifference to the welfare of others, including Felipe. And Todd has got the evidence to prove it. Todd has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Round Rock, in Texas, and across the nation. And it is his intention, with a successful resolution of this case, that it sends a resounding message to all employers in these high-risk construction areas to begin to focus more on safety of their employees and less on the bottom line. Todd has built a substantial reputation nationwide by consistently winning cases other law firms have turned down. And his amazing courtroom skills and headline-grabbing success rate continue to provide his clients with the results they need and the results they deserve. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Round Rock, Texas. It is my great pleasure to introduce Todd Keller to the show. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Thank you, Steve. It's great to be here.
We're here today to talk about a number of your cases, but let's talk about your firm. What type of law does Carlson Law practice?
We are a general personal injury law firm for the most part. We actually have a couple of offshoots into family and criminal law as well, but for the most part, we have a firm of 14 offices around the state of Texas and actually growing into other states now. And we focus our practice on personal injury, mostly catastrophic types of injuries, including car wrecks. We actually represent a number of sexual assault victims, wrongful death cases, and a group of cases that I'm very excited about helping out on right now is our human trafficking victims. We have a pretty big number of human trafficking victim cases.
Good. When a lawyer first becomes a lawyer, they have many choices about what type of law they want to practice. You are practicing law to represent the little guy. Why is that?
You know, I fell into this, I kind of view it as a lucky stroke. I was chasing, who was going to pay me the most money when I left the Marine Corps. I actually practiced law for a while in the Marine Corps. And I couldn't find one of the big, silk stocking firms that wanted to hire me based on my pedigree of not having gone to Harvard or Yale. And so I ended up at a personal injury law firm. At that firm, I started to realize where my passion lie. And it really, at this point in my life, if I couldn't represent individuals who were injured, I don't think I'd practice law. I'd rather cut grass.
There are many difficulties when you represent the little guy, depending on what state you are in. And the first case that we are going to be talking about is the case of Felipe Marentes. Tell our audience a little bit about who Felipe Marentes was.
Felipe was a hardworking husband and father who was a welder for a company that manufactured these water tanks. And Felipe had been trained by the company that he was working for to learn how to do this job. And he did as he was supposed to do, or at least as he was trained to do. And ultimately, as a result of that training and the lack of good training, Felipe fell to his death in a water tower when a weld broke, and the piece that he was welding actually fell on top of him.
Yeah, he was about, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, about 45 feet up. He had gone up there with the actual piece that he was going to weld, correct?
Right. Actually, the piece was lifted by a crane, and so Felipe was 45 feet up from the bottom of the tank. The tank was actually up, raised in the air, much above that. But what the crane was actually holding the piece in place until it put it in place, and the welding plates that Felipe was welding to. There were a number of problems with those welding plates as found by the Osha, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. But ultimately, Felipe was not tied off to the crane, which would have been the proper way to tie him off, so that when that weld did fail, what should have happened is Felipe should have been knocked away and left free hanging from the crane, probably scared, but alive.
Now, when you say this should not have been done in the procedure that it was, tell us who Luke Humphrey is.
So Luke Humphrey was a safety manager
for the Phoenix Fabricators, right?
Yes, for that, and of course Phoenix Fabricators is the company that that we're talking about here. But Luke Humphrey was a safety manager for Phoenix Fabricators who had on prior occasions warned Phoenix Fabricators that they weren't doing it right and that there was a safety violation and they were putting workers' lives at risk. Luke was ignored, and then after Maria Marentes contacted an attorney to assist her with what had happened with her husband, Luke Humphreys came forward and spoke with our referring counsel and gave a statement about what he had told Phoenix Fabricators and that they were putting lives at risk.
The root cause of what happened is really negligence on the company. I mean, they allowed things to happen and allowed corners to be cut by that crew and by that department because that crew made them a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And there was not protocols in place to allow that to happen, safety protocols that were ignored. They were in place. I put them in place.
So basically, their own safety manager said that they were violating safety regulations. Why were they doing that?
It was cheaper. And they could, time is money, and they could get the job done quicker if they didn't slow down and take the safety precautions that they were required to take. It would have been no out-of-pocket money for them to do this. It was simply a matter of they could build faster if they weren't safe. And it's pure and simple. They were trying to make more money quicker.
This case is still in litigation. What are your legal strategies to successfully resolve this case?
So the issues around any kind of a worker case in Texas, if there's workers' compensation in play, we have to overcome some pretty significant hurdles. First of all, if a person in the state of Texas is injured on the job, the injury is not going to allow us to get outside of workers' comp. Death is a little bit different. If there is a death case and we can show that there is gross neglect, then we have a case that the jury is allowed to hear and then make a decision. So the first thing that we have to do is show that Phoenix Fabricators was grossly negligent.
And I would assume that Luke Humphrey is going to testify on that, right?
Luke Humphrey will testify. We have the Osha investigators who found gross neglect and actually fined Phoenix Fabricators as a result of their findings. We'll have them testify. So we think we meet that hurdle in spades.
When you successfully resolve this case, how does this benefit society?
Every worker is entitled to work in a safe environment, especially if the employer can reasonably make that environment safe, as is the case here. A few months after Felipe fell to his death, there was a case, I believe it was in Arizona. I may be wrong about where it was, but Phoenix Fabricators had another case in another state where a similar incident happened, where a man fell to his death while welding one of these water tanks. I don't believe that the tank collapsed on top of him, but he fell. He should have been properly secured to the crane, as is the case here with Mr. Marentes. But the reason that the company has not done anything to change that is because they haven't been held accountable. And the only way to hold a company accountable is to hit them in the pocketbook, because that's the only way that they think. So if Phoenix Fabricators is forced to pay a judgment for their grossly negligent acts in the Marentes case, our hope is that they start to take some time, that they make sure that they do strap their workers in when they're going to put them up on these towers and have them weld, that they actually scrape the paint off of the plates that they're welding together so that the weld will hold. There were so many shortcuts taken in this case, and we believe probably in most cases that Phoenix Fabricators is doing, that they cost lives.
Today we're very fortunate to have Felipe's widow, Maria, here. So let's bring her on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Maria Marentes to the show. Welcome to the show, Maria.
Thank you.
Maria, I really appreciate you coming here today. Tell our audience a little bit about your husband.
Felipe was a lovely dad. I mean, he loved his kids. He wanted the best for his family. Funny. He was like the funny dad. I was more like the strict mom.
How long were you married?
9 years.
Bring us back to the day when you first found out that there was a serious injury at the job site. How were you notified?
I remember it was around 1:30 in the afternoon, and I got a call from the detective, and all I remember is saying that something happened to Felipe.
And what happened after that?
I just remember hanging up, and after like not even 5 minutes, my sister came to my house, and that's all I remember.
What did you learn later on about what had happened to Felipe?
One of the top parts of the what is it called, the water tank, fell on him, and that he passed away immediately.
You're now represented by Todd and his firm. What have they been able to find out, do you know, about what transpired during that time? In other words, some of the safety violations that they did. Have you found, what have you discovered about that?
All I can say is, if I remember Felipe, even before the accident, that I just remember him saying that he felt unsafe. But I mean, he was staying in that job because the money, and because he wanted to provide a better life for us, but he didn't feel safe.
And he would tell you that from time to time.
Yes.
If Phoenix Fabricators and Erectors was sitting in my chair right now, what would you say to them? And remember, you're on national TV.
My husband's supposed to be here, and because of because for them to save money and time, my kids don't have their dad.
How has the loss of your husband changed your life?
Never be the same. Break my heart to see my daughter. He will never be her graduation, or when she gets married. It's just they were so close to their dad. It's just never be the same.
I want to thank you very much for being on the show. My condolences. Thank you. And we wish you much success with this case.
Thank you.
So, Todd, let's talk about, you mentioned in the state of Texas, workers' comp and the difficulty in suing your employer. Let's talk about this elephant in the room, because I don't think in any other state they have such difficult times to be able to sue an employer, and you have to overcome this, like, for example, in this wrongful death.
Right.
What is gross negligence anyway?
So gross negligence is defined a number of different ways in the law, but one of the ways that it's defined is the type of negligence where the defendant knew or should have known that their actions were likely to lead to death or serious bodily injury, and despite that, proceeded with conscious indifference in that same course of action.
Right. And one of the important pieces of evidence you're going to have is Luke Humphrey, who was their own safety manager, who warned them about this,
Yes.
and also Osha, correct?
Correct. Yeah, Luke Humphrey establishes the conscious indifference. He establishes the fact that Phoenix Fabricators knew the risk that they were taking with the lives of other people.
When a case is settled successfully in a case of employer's gross neglect, what can an individual recover?
In a case like this, the only thing that the family can recover for is the punitive damages that the jury awards. Those punitive damages have to be based upon economic damages in Texas. So it's a little bit tricky. We have to try the case and show what the economic loss was. But because of the way that the law is structured in Texas, even if the jury awards an amount for an economic loss, the family can't recover that. The only recovery they can have is for the punitive damage award that is set forth.
When anybody's injured on the job, what should they do immediately?
If you're injured on the job, the first thing I want you to do is get to the hospital. I know there's some lawyers out there that say, call me. Well, I'd like you to call me, but first I want you to get the best treatment you can. But don't talk to whoever the defendant may be. If it's an employer, don't talk to the employer.
I would assume that a lot of employers would say, we'll take care of you, don't worry about it, don't talk to any lawyer, right?
I have never had a case where that promise wasn't broken.
If you're able, when you're in the hospital or after the hospital, write down everything you remember. What happened, correct?
Absolutely. Memories fade. I'm feeling that more and more as I feel my age, but doesn't matter how old you are, memories fade and memories modify over time. It is far better to write it down close to the event so that you know exactly what happened.
OSHA worker safety rights. Who is OSHA? We've talked about it. And what do they cover?
So they cover workplace safety. OSHA essentially is there to make sure that the workers in our country are free from unsafe work conditions, that they are they inspect so that they not only the equipment but the people, the practices, all of those things are followed. OSHA has engineers that look at different processes and make sure that those processes are followed by employers who might otherwise want to take shortcuts and risk the lives of their employees.
I've heard of situations where people report anonymously to OSHA that there's unsafe conditions where they work. Can you do that?
You absolutely can do that. And you are protected by federal law when you do that. I've seen that law violated as well. However, you absolutely can, and I would encourage people to do that because you're saving lives when you report an OSHA violation.
Because you've been a trial lawyer for some time, won some really good cases, you have a lot of people contact you for representing them. How do you decide which cases to handle?
I would love to say that I made all my decisions in my brain because I looked at the law and I looked at the facts and can I win? And I do that. But ultimately, the cases that I decide to get involved in are because I've been touched in some way emotionally. I try to make fewer and fewer decisions from the heart, but it still happens. In fact, my staff recently got me, I guess it was last Christmas, they got me a button for my desk. It says no. And I'm supposed to push it, and it's different ways to say no. But when I see a wrong, I feel compelled to try to right it.
I want to thank you for being on the show, and good luck with this case.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.